Mack and Maq talks here. Maybe it's fun to intro it that way, right? So
why not? It's perfect. And I just been putzing around here, grabbing a couple more pictures.
Yeah, we're talking. So we're gonna just chit chat here for about 5 minutes tops, as some people trickle in and we get the links out there. But basically, talking.
Right, I'll start tagging some people.
Yeah. But in the meantime, we're talking basically Reification errors part 2, bad assignment of symbolization, how it impacts us all the time.
And a lot of people have been talking about flags, and this is something that comes up a lot. While we're waiting for people to trickle on, I thought I'd tell you this is something that you and I never talked about before. My friend John Gray taught me this. The purpose of debate is to make the argument go away. It's kind of the point.
Yeah.
If you actually settle the argument, everybody knows the answer to the argument, and they don't go back to it again.
Yeah.
And so it's worthwhile for us to bring up topics that are coming around, because maybe we can put a stop. Maybe we can kill the debate.
Yeah. Effectively, it seems like with anything on that, what you were just referring to there, you basically have it where if it's something of significance, then either you're going to agree to disagree but no longer get in each other's way, or you're going to find some kind of an agreement on the debate, right? I mean, in other words, it won't stay at the same place the next time you enter the debate. And too often we see in the group or elsewhere, it's the same discussions happening with the same people. The debate stays the exact same. Nothing
That's
moves.
right. It never progresses.
Yeah.
Nobody ever changes or maybe even never even hears the other side.
Yeah.
And you talked before about how if we could just sort of agree on a good way to disagree.
My entire philosophy on politics is that every single political discussion on the Hill is counterproductive until not just not productive, but actually counterproductive.
On the Hill, you mean?
Yeah, in D.C. Any legislative discussion from politicians, and remember, I ran a congressional campaign in 2018, so this is where this context is coming from here. Every discussion in politics is counterproductive until there is an agreement on how to discuss disagreements. That's the issue that I have, and I'm going to go full screen for you here. There we go.
And I'm just looking through some of these, some of these flags bring up. Some flags are just dumb. It's just, this is the seal on a bed sheet is a really popular design, but it's kind of ugly. Like from any distance, you can't tell what's on that seal. Like you might recognize this one, but can you even read it?
Yeah, but
nope. Let me get smaller.
Before we get too far down the Reification, I want to cap that off because they came up, and I think it's an important underscore here. On the agreement on finding an agreement on how to discuss disagreements being the only critical one, the inability to find an agreement on how to discuss disagreements from a political standpoint is how representatives then are able to use things like the rhetoric that gets used for like for Drew Brees is a great example. Drew Brees does Bring Your Bible to School campaign, and then all of a sudden LGBTQ is calling him anti-gay, which is completely not the case. But the reason that they do that is because they're mirroring the representatives, because the representatives don't know how to discuss disagreements without invoking these rhetorical attacks. So what happens is that trickles that's the biggest trickle down. That trickles down to the populace, and they do the exact same thing. And then the organizations and the lobbyists do the same thing. And that's why until there's an agreement on how to discuss disagreements, it is counterproductive.
All right, well, so and that's what I was getting at, is that I'm hoping that there's a particular thing that comes up with flags over and over and over, and it's that reification error. It's that connection between the symbol and the thing, and everybody sort of bangs up about what the heck is a symbol even for before they can talk about the meaning of the symbol and yada yada yada. The Confederate flag is a perfect example of that, because everybody disagrees on who's in charge of it, and that comes up a lot with the flags. So let's start with, these people want to beat people up for flags. The real big one, and there was I think there was a rumor, but I think this went away, that Trump was going to make a law against defacing the flag.
Well, there was some. Well, I don't know the accuracy of any of it. The reports earlier in the week of just that floating idea of maybe there should be a crime penalty for burning of the flag. And I mean, I've heard that floated around circles in Republican conservative circles. To me, that's the most anti-American thing, most into, and there's other things that are anti-American to the same level, but
so they can just stop the protests.
Right, that's exactly what it breaks down to. Effectively, the floating is some kind of felony or misdemeanor crime associated with burning of the flag. I don't know if that's accurate with the Trump campaign or not. I've heard it, myself in different circles from people who are kind of, I would call, Republicans have their own, liberals are on the extreme right now, but to the conservative Republican side, they have their own authoritative components, and the flag is one of them. They're not going to take as much money, but if you want to burn the flag, there's plenty of Republicans you'll find support about that should be a crime, which is kind of ridiculous from any perspective I've ever come across. So.
And one of the things that we, and here's the issue, like if the question comes up, well, whose flag is it? It's pretty obvious that it's his flag.
Right.
The issue is that there's like this second layer of meaning, what it represents.
Yeah, it's no longer an ownership issue because no one disputes the purchase and the ownership of the flag. It is a dispute of really message, right? That's kind of the two competing things going at each other, right? What does he mean when he burns it, and what does the flag mean before it's burnt, right? Isn't that the
That's exactly it. What does it represent? And who makes the choice about what it represents? And then there's a second layer that can happen where it's like some supernatural layer. Like all of a sudden we're talking about like a sacred symbol.
Oh, this goes back.
Represents something.
This goes back to desecrating the gods back in ancient war, right? I mean, desecration of symbols, right? When you talk about some spiritual or supernatural component to it, that's people were desecrating symbols back. What was his name you told me about? Who went on a horrible cold streak after
General Pompey.
Yeah, Pompey.
Yeah, General Pompey. He decided he wanted to go and check out this Hebrew temple because nobody had ever done it. The Romans had a long history of using people's myths, using those strong feelings based on these symbolic relationships against each other. And then he went and violated the Hebrew temple, and this is the sanctum sanctorum, right?
Right.
And what do they find? They find some benches, they find some scrolls. They don't find any statues. They don't find any beads. They don't find any idols. They don't find any shrines.
Yeah, completely opposite of what they would typically come across, right?
Yeah, it's like completely abstract. The God isn't even like in a statue anymore. He's just this idea up in the air, and it's almost like General Pompey couldn't quite cope with that. It was almost like it was too much for him. And there's a lot of different evidence. From lots of people over the years that the word, the divine power, was writing. For the Hebrews, for thousands of years, the only book they had was the book. That's why it's the Bible. It's the book. There's not a second one. They don't have a bunch of books, and the Bible's one of them. That was just the only one. That second, it's almost like a reification creates a skip into yet another layer. And we can go back, when you're talking about flags, you can go back to sort of a functional thing. Like what's the purpose of the flag exactly?
Right. Well, and I'll give my definition of that because I've thought about it. Purpose of flag, right? There's multiple purposes it could be used for, but just speaking out the most obvious, identification. If back in the most, who are you? What area are you? What are you representing in that sense? Like, is this a hostile place? Is this a non-hostile place? Right? I mean, it is to convey a certain messaging to people coming in.
Well, there's all the military flags. Like there's all the ones that identify different people, different groups, different armies. Like that's a big part of where when you talk about the magic sky claw, the sky part is so that the guys can see it and they can rally around it. So we can talk about maybe having like a permanent symbol. But then there's all these other things that we get imbued with. The big one is, this is what we fought and died for, right?
Right. Well, which is the most, you're talking about people who say this is what we fought and died for, referring to the flag, correct?
And what they really mean is they're fighting for their home. They're fighting for
their freedom.
That place.
That's my greatest issue with conservatives, because that's typically the go-to argument. Men and women have died for or fought for this, and I'm always saying, no, they didn't fight for a piece of cloth. They fought so that people could actually burn up that piece of cloth, even if they disagreed with them, so long as it wasn't infringing on other people's rights. They fought to have the ability to protest your own house. That's what they fought for, and people don't grasp that.
And is that the thing? Like, is this what people are always trying to avoid an argument about? When we talk about burning the flag and who's in charge of the flag, do they want to talk about the army and home and freedom because they don't want to talk about the dissent?
That's a good question. I mean, it's possible that, I typically think that the reason people don't go into the deepest layer of conversation is to avoid the deepest layer of conversation. So it wouldn't be against the human nature that's why that part of the conversation is typically avoided. The part where, go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, we started talking about this argument that just always comes around. When an argument always comes around, it's because there's a communication blockage.
Yeah.
So if we can identify the disconnect that the two sides or the three sides or the four sides tend to stumble over, then it's maybe we can actually go discuss.
Yeah, we could probably dissect that one pretty easily, right? So the number one answer you get is men and women have died for, or I fought for, or my son or my father fought for. So these are the top arguments for like a criminal penalty for burning the flag from people who otherwise tend to be pretty libertarian or conservative minded. Then the arguments that burning the flag is acceptable, right, which typically, ironically, comes from the left right now, you'll find those arguments being speech-based.
People died for the flag.
Right.
This is like a variation on pain makes you noble. If someone dies, it's like a death sacrament. We're talking about that second layer.
Well, martyrism.
Supernatural. If people were, if they project if they're projecting onto this flag, sorry, I'm trying to unshare.
No, you're good.
If they're projecting effectively people's ghosts onto this flag, then
do you have your computer screen on something to show? Because right now you're on your. We have your face on the screen. Does your computer screen have something you want to show? I wasn't sure if that's what you were clicking on.
No, I'm trying to unshare.
There we go.
There you go. No, I'm trying to unshare. There you go. You got my face yet?
Yeah. Yep. You're good. So I
was just gonna go take a peek at the comments. I'm real great at drawing. I don't know about that. I think I'm getting a little bit. No, Dan, you said yours is about as good as yours, about as good as mine.
Well,
I had a theory that people get trained on the wrong hand, and that's where really crappy handwriting comes from. My friend Mark was left-handed, but we all thought he should have been right-handed. We always wonder if maybe it's because he got pushed into the wrong hand. So the American flag is one flag that we talk about where the reification is.
You sent me a cool flag from the India Trading Company.
Yeah. East India Trading Company.
East India Trading Company.
Let me find a picture of that one. That's the one that Buckminster Fuller taught me about in one of his books. Let's see here, East India. And I actually put a picture of that up in the other link. And he pointed out, looking at the East India Tea Company flag, that maybe America was intended to be like a commercial enterprise and not really so much of a territory. You ever heard of the Tamil Kings in Africa?
I have not.
I think it was either Africa or India. The Tamil Kings were these guys that never they couldn't quite own the territory on top of each other, so they ended up being traders, and they were at the bottom of the continent. I'm trying to remember where. Maybe I should look that up. But they were sort of a trading enterprise. The Vikings were a little bit the same way. The Vikings were into their boats and in their travels, and they sort of treated people like a farm. And there's a lot of evidence that various types of pirates have been doing this for thousands of years.
No doubt. Well, and that's a large discussion. I won't even hop on that because you can make arguments that more comfortability may exist, but that strategies have not changed all that much from those.
Well, and at the time the East India Company was operating, the New World was pretty wild. There was not a lot of constraint on it. It was dangerous as shit, but there wasn't a lot of people actually pushing people around. So it makes sense that they might try and have a commercial enterprise or a commercial empire free of all the old world empires. If we start moving into space, we'll probably see something similar to that, where the transnationals will probably try and get something going. But yeah, this is basically where we invented the American flag. Yeah,
which is wild, and especially when you consider the fact that the Boston Tea Party
that's right,
was effectively a protest against the East India Company, and if I'm not mistaken, right? Those are the boats they boarded, correct?
Was it a protest against them?
Not against them, but against the taxation on the tea. But
that's right. It was a protest against the tea,
right?
And so these quote unquote Indians came in and destroyed the tea, which I'm not sure. Now I think about it, that's if it was the East India Tea Company, that's kind of a backwards protest.
Well, that was actually what the Freedom Riders or whatever but this is where the dispute between some of the founders really kind of began to take place, and specifically with Samuel L. Jackson. My good, but I can't believe I said Samuel L. But no, but specifically there was dispute because of the fact that it was counterproductive to dump those teas over because of the fact that of the loss monetary value when they were disputing taxation. But it didn't matter because they were saying, we're not going to pay for this shit. We're not going to be taxed for this shit. And you guys can go to fucking hell. I mean, it been effectively, but I just find it ironic when you sent me that to see that the American flag is so closely aligned to that, considering how connected America's founding is to, basically holding a protest on their ships. So.
No, going back to the reification here, let me turn this on. There you go. You got my screen?
I have your, not your screen. It's still on your camera facing your face.
Let me,
yeah. What are some of the most common reification errors that you'll see in group, for example? As we're about to hop into more in-depth analysis on the flag, before we do that, what's some of those that you would find people in the group almost conditionally, going into their knee-jerk responses? What are some that you see commonly?
Well, that's kind of what I got covered here. All of these connections are reifications, right? Is the flag, does it symbolize the place that the army is going to gather? Does it symbolize back home? Does it symbolize our freedom in an abstract way? Does it symbolize our right to dissent in an abstract way? And then we're also throwing.
And Dan, this is another one of those really tremendous. They're really more Picasso's. The closer you get to these drawings, the better they get. I'm just kidding, but no.